running pals, today I'm going to talk about how I qualified for Boston, London and some of the other major marathons. I'm going to talk about what the qualifying standards are for the marathon majors, which if you don't know are the six major marathons: Tokyo, London, Boston, Berlin, Chicago and New York, which you get a special medal if you complete all six, and they're considered kind of collectors marathons. So I'm going to talk about how to qualify for all of those, what the standards are, and then how I did it and my top tips for qualifying for the race you want to get into with time qualifying. So let's get started. Okay, so let me just go through what the standards are to qualify. Time qualifying is where you can get in, it's sometimes called good for age. It's where you can use the time that you've got in a previous marathon to kind of prove that you're fast enough to be given a spot that way. So in London it's called good for age. For Boston, unless you get charity, you have to time qualify. So it's often a good route to get into races which otherwise would be quite hard to get into. All these races generally have other ways to get in as well. Most of them, except Boston, have a ballot, which is luck of the draw. I'm pretty sure all of them have charity entries as well, and you can also go with the tour group, which is a bit more expensive, but you do have options if time qualifying isn't quite the standard you're at the moment. You can still, it's still achievable to do the major marathons if you put a bit of effort and money in. Right, so let me just go through the time standards. I'm going to link all of them in detail in the description, and for now I'm just going to talk about my age group. These are usually the under 40, the under 30 group, but if you're a bit older, your standards will generally be more lax. So let's go through. So I'll start with Boston. For men, the standard is currently 3 hours to get in, and for women it's 3 hours and 30 minutes for a previous marathon. The issue is with Boston is that there's a cut-off, which means that even if you get that time and you can submit your time, you may not necessarily get in, because if enough people get that time or better, they will have to cut off the entries at a certain point. So you might not actually get in with that time. I think it was 2 minutes below this year, so you only got in if you got 3:28 or less, I believe, for women, and around 2:58 for men. The same thing happens for London as well. So the standard for women is 3:45, so a bit easier. For men it's 3 hours again, but last year they started having a cut-off. Last year I'm pretty sure everyone who got those standards got in, but yeah, there was a cut-off of a few minutes this year. For Berlin, women have to get 3 hours or less, so it's a lot harder for women, and men have to get 2:45. So those are stricter standards, but as far as I know, I'll correct myself in the description or on the screen if I'm wrong, but as far as I know, if you get that standard, you're in. The same goes for Chicago, where the standard for women is 3:35 and for men is 3:05, so a little bit easier to get compared to Berlin. For New York, the standards are 3:13 for women and 2:53 for men. But the issue with New York is that if you get the qualifying time in a New York running race, they also have times that you can use a half marathon time for. If you have those times, then you're guaranteed entry. But if you get a qualifying time in any non-New York race, you're going to have to go through a first come first served process. That's just passed for this year. But yeah, if you have that time in London, for example, you will then have to try and get there early enough to get an entry that way, and it can be quite tricky. Finally, for Tokyo, the standards technically are 3:30 for women and 2:45 for men, but there are only 300 international entries, so 150 for each gender. I put my name in the hat last year with a time of 3:26 and I didn't actually get in. So you aren't guaranteed an entry, and no one's entirely sure on what the process is. We don't know if it's a cut-off or if you just have to be meet a certain criteria because you have to give a little description of yourself on the page. So I'm not entirely sure, but I'd say just with Tokyo, you may not get in if you hit the time qualifying. So yeah, that's all the standards, and now I'm going to go through my top tips for how you can qualify. So the way I qualified was I used the time from the Edinburgh Marathon, which I did in 2018, to time qualify for the London Marathon. Then I used my time from the London Marathon in 2019 to get into Boston and London again for 2020. I also did the New York Marathon in November, and I'll be able to use that time, which was a bit better, in the Chicago and maybe the Tokyo marathons. It was definitely a goal of mine to get into Boston. As soon as I kind of got into the running scene, that was always something in my mind. For British people, generally getting into London is the bigger deal, but for me, I kind of had that in my head as Boston being my end goal. So my first tip is to establish a mileage that works for you. So right now I'm doing quite high mileage, 50-mile weeks, that kind of thing, but you don't need to do that at all. So when I first qualified for London and Edinburgh, I worked out the average because I logged my miles, and the average mileage I was doing was 27 miles a week. Now, maybe I have a certain amount of natural ability that not everyone has, so some people will have to put in extra miles, but that's something that you really need to establish for yourself. What times are you getting in the shorter races? How many miles do you need to improve? Is adding mileage something that really helps you out, or should you focus more on some of the other aspects of training, which I'll go into next? So yeah, I would say the top tip is to just get a mileage that your body is comfortable with and that you can adjust to for a full training period without getting injured, but also that's enough to give you that full extent of training that you'll need to time qualify. My next tip is to train smart. So when I was just running, basically running miles, my time didn't improve in a whole year. But then last year, 2019, after the London Marathon, I decided to take training seriously. I started incorporating different types of workouts in, which I'll go into now, and I managed to cut 3 minutes off my time. And to be honest, I took the first half really easy because I wasn't intending on racing it. So I think I actually could have run a lot faster in that instance and got an even better improvement. When I say to do smart training, I basically mean to incorporate different types of workouts. So there are 4 main types of running workouts, and then a 5th type of exercise that you want to be doing to improve your time and hopefully qualify. These are a long run. Usually people do these on Saturday or Sunday. A tempo run, which is where you go at 80% of effort for an extended period of time, maybe 3 or 4 miles, usually in the middle of another run. Speed work, which is really important, and that's how I cut a lot off my time, and it's something you really need to do. And finally, recovery runs, which are easy miles, but they're really important for your legs and for just keeping your body ticking over when you're marathon training without pushing in the workout. Then the 5th type of exercise to do is cross training. Now I have a spin bike, as you can see here, but you should also be doing some kind of weight training, so one leg exercises, which I will definitely do in a future video, working out your arms as well and your core, just making sure that your muscles are well worked out and that you're getting cardio in other ways to allow your body to recover the running muscles once in a while. So that's what I would do spinning for. For those 4 types of workouts, you can find lots of resources online of what that is. I'll link a video in the description that my friends made recently that give more details on how exactly to go about doing these workouts, what speed to do. But this is just a general outline of the 4 main types of running and the 5th cross training that you should do to really improve your times, because if you do them, you definitely will improve a lot. Next, I would say it's worth making running a part of your life. When I say that, I just mean that if you want to qualify for something like Boston, you're going to want to be in the top 10% at least of runners, and so you need to be kind of dedicated and you need to like running. So making running part of your life isn't necessarily a bad thing. It could mean on a Saturday you go out with a group and you have brunch afterwards for your long run. It just becomes part of your weekend routine and becomes something you enjoy. Doing regular park runs can really help as well. I'll put in a vlog now that I took at the weekend. I did a long run which began with a park run for my friend's 100th park run, and then we ran an extra 16 miles afterwards in a group, and that was a really great way to just socialise and get the miles in at the same time.
Okay, we've got a lady here on her 100th run. That is a great effort. Well done, Sarah. Sarah, sorry, well done, Sarah. Can we please just shout around when she's going round?
Sarah, not Sarah.
You can let her go first.
So I've just finished up parkrun and it was a bit slower than normal, but I was running with my friends who I'm going to do the long run with. We're right by City Airport. But yeah, that was really fun, and I think we're just going to have a quick bit of cake for Sarah's 100 and then go for the long run. So just under 5 miles to go on the long run. I'm feeling quite good actually. There was a race and they were emptying water bottles that people had half drunk out of, so it was a bit gross and I had some of that, but now I'm refreshed so I don't mind.
Another way to make running part of your life that I like to do is to use running as a way to run errands, if that makes sense. So I live 2 to 3 miles away from a couple of different shopping areas. So if I need to pick something up, or it's the same goes for if I need to pick up a parcel from the post office, it's about the same distance. I just run there and run back. So last weekend I took a trip to Decathlon where I ran there. I just needed to pick up a new yoga mat and also try some new gels for this training period. I really like Decathlon for getting things like this. It's quite cheap, but generally it's got quite a good range as well. So yeah, that's what I did to run an errand this last weekend. By running to do an errand, you don't get bored in the same way because you've kind of got a purpose. That's what I find, at least anyway. If I'm running to just pick something up, I'm just going there with a purpose and I come back, and it's not like going out for long miles when you don't really fancy it. You're getting something done, and I find that really helps. And finally, running as a commute is a really good way to get easy miles in as well, and a way to make running part of your life. Next, I would say it's a really good idea to take inspiration from others. Maybe you have friends that you run with or that you know through your local park run or something like that who've qualified for London or Boston or any of the races you want to qualify for. Speaking to them can really help. They'll probably be able to give you some good tips, and you can kind of talk about your personal goals in the way that I can't really now. Also, they may just give you kind of inspiration and show you that that goal is worth it. Maybe if they started out where you are and then a year later they managed to qualify, that could really help your mindset in training. Also, I'd really recommend checking out the Boston Qualifiers Survey. This survey is a survey that a guy named Sean did of around 400 people who've qualified for Boston. Everyone was given how they qualified, what their training was like, how many miles they did, that kind of thing. And he's listed all of those on his website. He's given me his permission to include it in the video. And if you have a look, you can look by age group and by gender to see people who are in your particular category and how they trained. It's a really broad range. You've got people who were naturally talented and hit the qualifying on their first go without much training, and you have people who put a lot of work in, and it's really good to read all of those and see what people in your age group and gender did, and it can really help you just understand maybe what it might take for you. So here's the page now. You can see I'm on the home page, and then I'll go into the category I want, which is women 18 to 34, and I can look at a number of profiles of women who've answered the questionnaire. It's really helpful. So I'll link that in the description. And thanks Sean for letting me use it. Next, as a quick tip, I say it's really important to make sure you get the right race. If you're doing a really hilly marathon and you want to use that to qualify, that's going to be a lot harder than if you pick somewhere flat. There's currently no restrictions, although people in the Let's Run will sometimes complain about this. There's no restrictions on what race you can use to qualify as long as it's in the set list from Boston. There's certain races you can do that are net downhill, so you're essentially running downhill for the whole race, so that can be a bit faster. So if you're thinking of using a particular race to qualify and it's hilly, maybe think about the fact that you're going to have to factor in an extra couple of minutes on your qualifying time. Finally, my main tip is to make sure that you actually want to do this. You're going to need to be motivated, and you're going to need to have this as a proper goal. I had my mum promise that she was actually going to pay for some of the trip if I qualified, and that was a goal for me in itself. But I did want to go to Boston generally, and I did really want to run that race. If you're just thinking about running the London Marathon because your other friends are, or you want to qualify for Boston for the clout, that's not really going to motivate you properly in the training period. So just have a think, do I actually want to qualify for these races? Do I want to put the work in? But if you are sure that you want to do the races, great, good luck. Hopefully by following my other tips you can get a little bit closer. I really hope that giving you these tips will help you reach your goal, whether it be qualifying for Boston, London, or any other race that have time qualifying. And I believe in you. Thanks for watching. Bye.
When running with the wolves.